All right, Bo and Luke Nation, welcome to another amazing episode of the Bo and Luke Show. I'm your co-host, Luke Carignan.
And I'm your other co-host, Bo Bravo. And today we are talking to, I think he is like this is a three-peat for Bobby Moran. I think we're making him an unofficial Bo and Luke Show contributor because he just has so much valuable information and he loves to share with each and every one of you. And today it's all about personal finance.
That's right. And folks, if you have enough money for retirement and you've got it all figured out, then what I want you to do is drop what you're doing right now, go to the boandlukeshow.com and try to become a guest on here because you've got it all figured out. And this is all for people that don't have it figured out yet and are still along that journey. And I think Bobby and Bo, you both give us amazing insight for not only myself, but our listeners. And it's just get ready for a journey ahead of you with some really good things you can put into action today to make a difference tomorrow in your finances.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. So go to the boandlukeshow.com. Check us out. You can get to YouTube. You can get to Apple Podcasts. You can get to any other platform that you want to listen to us on. Check out our sponsors and affiliates. Got some great deals there for you. But everything through the website. So you can send us feedback. And honestly, Luke said it. If you have expertise in this topic or other topics and you've figured things out that you think the whole Bo and Luke Nation would love to hear, by all means, hit the guest request button, fill out the form, don't
do it. And Bo, don't you have a webinar coming up later during the day this episode is being dropped?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a webinar through Career Learning's HR Web Advisor on Thursday. So right after this episode comes out, 2:30 p.m. on COVID-19 reintegration, getting your employees back to the office and how to get it done. That is the most important part, man. If you don't know how to get it done, you're going to struggle. And I don't want you to struggle. So it's a 1-hour webinar, 45 minutes presentation, 15-minute Q&A. You can find it on hrwebadvisor.com. Check it out if you're interested. But we'll be giving some great content, some great insights and inspiration people can take away. Just like we do with the Bo and Luke Show, it's time to do better, be better, to know better, but ultimately to do better. And that's through learning how to get it done.
Well, let the learning begin, Bo. Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Folks, welcome. And welcome again, Bobby Moran. I think this is the third time that we've had you on the show, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a three-peat, right?
Yeah, you are a three-peat. But you're like back by popular demand. Everyone keeps saying, bring Bobby back. When's Bobby coming back? So we're very happy to have you on here.
You were leading in the rankings, Bobby, until last Thursday when Chelsea took our famous RN in the COVID unit
in Chicago, right?
In Chicago.
Like part of me's kind of mad that I'm losing out to her right now, but I'm also kind of like I'm actually really glad to hear that.
Guys, we got an amazing episode today. This is a topic that, I mean, especially with everything going on in the economy right now, should be top of mind for everybody. And it's one of those situations that people get in where they're like, oh my gosh, like I don't have enough. And as Americans, if you look at the numbers and the statistics out there, I feel like there's a false sense of people that think that they have enough money for retirement or that they're even good or somewhat good at managing their own finances. I'll be the first one to throw my hand up in the air and say, I am horrible at it. The reason why, we picked this topic is so that we can all get better. So if you listeners out there are in the same position, and based on the statistics that I'm looking at in front of me right now, most of you are definitely in the same position as me right now, but you probably just don't say anything about it. They never taught us about it in school, and you don't really know who to go to. So you just keep going on as business as usual, which is not going to be good once you hit the age of 65. What do you think, gentlemen?
Luke, I was going to say the same thing, man. That is for some reason, and I don't know why exactly, right? I don't know when or where this started, but like this is definitely a topic we, generally speaking, don't talk about at home. Don't talk about around the dinner table. They don't really teach us in schools. You know, my former company, EverFi, was trying to change that through financial education in schools, both basically K through 12, but for the most part, even with friends, we don't talk about it, right? And what I've actually found in my life across the last 10, 15 years is that the people who actually have money are willing to talk about it. They're actually willing to dive in on this topic because it's incredibly important for your, I don't know about maybe survival is too much of a bleak, or it's too much of a alarmist word. But like at the end of the day, like a lot of your ability to survive a pandemic like this, I think money doesn't buy happiness, but it certainly can make life a hell of a lot easier, you know? So yeah, it's an incredibly important topic.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Bo?
No, I agree. I'll make a couple points. I think when it comes to money, especially, it's a very vulnerable topic for people, and nobody, any type of topic, being vulnerable and putting yourself out there can be risky, and it's risky for people rejecting you, people judging you, and so forth. Whenever you put your personal business on the street, especially money, if you're not doing it well, or you're broke, or whatever the case might be, it's probably the last topic you want to share with somebody or with people. And I think that especially during a time like now with the coronavirus and the number of people out of work, unemployed, is just staggering. Not only do you have to, you have people telling you to save for retirement, but hell, I need to save, people need to save just to get through now what could be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, that is incredibly stressful, anxiety ridden. How do you do that? And then how do you do that and not take from retirement savings that you had been maybe putting away, and it all gets taken away from you because you lost your job, and there's not much hope in the near term for getting it back. Tough topic.
It really is. And I want to take a minute to walk listeners through a little bit about how we got here, right? And why we don't talk about it. So schools have been evolving, over the years. I think in finance, that is one of the areas that they have not really evolved at all. We're still teaching people the same, balancing checkbooks, balance sheet type of thing that you might learn in a high school accounting class. Well, when those were created, and guys, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about like some of the acronyms here, but from my understanding, what we used to have is what was called a defined retirement plan, or a DRP. And back then, you'd have companies where the norm was you'd get out of college, you'd go work for a company, you'd work for them for 30 years. And in this DRP, they'd actually set aside money for you so that you really didn't have to worry about retirement. Now, those DRPs are typically called pensions. And if you're a millennial out there, a pension is actually what a company would save for you and then pay you when you're retired. If you're wondering what that is, they're kind of ancient right now, and companies aren't doing them. Probably in the 90s, I think the DCP, is that what it's called? The defined contribution plan became a lot more prevalent, and companies, to be more agile in the marketplace and more competitive, started switching to this, where we'll say, well, now you need to save for your retirement, and we're going to match a portion of that up to, let's say, 5-7%, depends on what company that you're working for, right? So as the companies switch this, you have a bunch of guys, bean counters, things out there that get this, and they recognize that it's better for the company. And if you start when you graduate college and you follow this plan to a T, you will probably have enough for retirement. However, absolutely nobody does it. So I'm going to throw a couple gut punches at you guys. All right. Here's my age bracket. So I'm what they call 30 somethings, age 30 to 39. Do you know what, guys, throw a guess out there as to what the median balance is of a 30 something's 401k account?
$40,000.
90.
Actually, you hit the average. The median is $16,000.
Wow.
That's a gut punch, right?
Yeah.
Now you look up, it doubles at 40 somethings, about 36,000, and then $60,000 at 50 somethings. Now, if you want to retire and have $60,000 a year, which I think we can all agree is not going to be a super glamorous retirement by any means, right? How much money do you need by the time you're 65 years old to have 60,000 a year, boys?
Are you talking about 60 grand is the annuity, the annual annuity?
Yep.
So how much,
Yep.
what's the lump sum you need to have?
Yep. Saved in the bank.
4 million.
That's high. That would give you a little better, but that's it's 1.5 million bucks. So, Bo, you'd be hitting a little over 100 grand. That'd be a respectable retirement if inflation doesn't kill us, you know? So I think what position a lot of our listeners find ourselves in, because I think our general demographic, like, first of all, if you're 21 years old and going out there and attacking life and listening to the Bo and Luke show, all the power to you. You're ahead of the game. I wish I would have done stuff like this when I was 21, and you're probably the same type of person that's already saving for your retirement. But our general demographic is older than that. We're looking 30s and older. And you might be in that position where you say, oh my gosh, I don't have enough saved right now. And I'm not going to be able to save enough, you know, because of my lifestyle in order to hit those metrics for retirement when I want to. So what do? We just kind of put it out of mind, right? Bobby, we invited you on the show for a very special reason. You have figured out ways. First of all, everyone, Bobby is, in my eyes, like a money genius. I really think he is. And he finds great ways to make money, but he's not doing it just by setting aside your typical 401k. Are you, Bobby?
No, I'm not. And by the way, I really appreciate that label, but it's certainly far from true. People like Warren Buffett, those guys, he's like a money genius. I'm still very much on the journey, early part of the journey of learning. But I will say, Luke, I was in a spot, in the Great Recession. Now these are all we have the Depression, Great Recession. I'm not sure what we're gonna call this. in kind of 07, 08, I was in a really tough spot. A couple of things had happened. One, in my 20s, I was just like in debt, working jobs that didn't pay too much, and I racked up credit card debt. I took out a loan to give it to my uncle, who turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme. No joke, that's true. In real estate, my parents actually lost money with him too. Like it was a whole thing. And so I turned 30 years old, and I think I was like, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000 in debt, like credit card debt. And then I also had still at that point about $60,000 in student loans. So well over $100,000 in debt. So I read a couple of books at that time that I think sort of put me on a different path. And probably the most important thing was a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that book really, I think, set me on this path where I really tried to improve my financial IQ. And up until that point, you guys, I had thought of money as kind of I don't want to say evil, but people who care about making money, people who, thought too much about money, that they were somehow, I don't know, they just weren't good people, right? Or that they were out there trying to, screw someone over. But what I've since found and learned is that by having a better understanding of how money works, not only can it help me, and it has helped me, but it's also, I've been able to help my friends save money through things that I've learned. So I think probably the most important thing, you take away one thing from this show today, one thing, it's about investing in yourself and improving your own financial IQ.
I agree with that. One thing that stands out about you, Bobby, is the way that you're saving. And so for the listeners out there, from an outsider's perspective, and first of all, Bobby, great shout out to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Bobby recommended that book, I think on episode 2 or 3. It was one of the first ones. He recommended it to me years ago. I finally picked it up, and it was absolutely amazing. It's kind of changed my life just in the past few months here. But one thing I've noticed about you, Bobby, is instead of saying, okay, well, here's my income, here's what I need to set aside, here's the savings, instead of doing that, your mindset is, hey, how can I go out and make more money? How can I go out and make more passive income and then leverage that towards my savings, right? Your mentality is not, hey, I need to set aside 30% of my, typical income that you get from an employer. It's how can I leverage outside passive income in order to save that money? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to to Bo's point at the very beginning about multiple streams of income and thinking about, all right, how do I put myself in a financial position to weather even like the toughest storms like they're going through right now. And everyone right now, whether you're Warren Buffett or whoever you are, everyone is thinking about, all right, how do I react to this moment? But, this is about really sort of putting yourself in a spot to think about, all right, taking a step back. When you think about like how people define wealth, right? Like people like, how much are you worth? People will say, oh, I'm worth $1.5 million, to use the number from earlier, Luke, right? Or let's say Bo had $4 million, right? And say, well, Bo is worth $4 million. Like one of the things that I think I learned from Robert Kiyosaki was that the way you define wealth is not about how much money you have, but about how much money, like what are your expenses in a given month? And then how much money do you have coming in without having to work or do anything? And if the amount of money, let's say you have $100,000 coming in on an annual basis, and your expenses are $80,000, not only are you taking that $20,000 and can you reinvest it, but like you're like you've reached nirvana. Like you don't have to work anymore. Like that is true wealth, right? Like literally not having to do anything, but still having all your expenses paid for. Now it depends on how much are your expenses, right? So you have to just think about, all right, what kind of lifestyle is really important to me? What do I want to lead? But I think the first thing is defining like what truly is wealth. And I think wealth is the ability to literally not have to work and still be able to lead a decent lifestyle.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think that's and if everybody had that definition of wealth running around in their head, and really use that as their foundation, everybody wouldn't. I don't know. I think people would do better to find their own nirvana, right?
And then Luke, I think that so going back to like my sort of evolution, going back to 2007, 2008, that was really a really tough time for me emotionally, psychologically, as right now it is for a lot of people. And this time still too is tough for all of us. But I think what I kind of committed myself to at that time was to just start learning more. And so I started, reading a bunch of books. And then I think the first thing I realized was, all right, I need to start ensuring that I need to somehow increase my income and I need to decrease my expenses, right? Because it sounds so basic, but my expenses were higher than my income, hence the perpetual sort of like cycle of debt, right? So I did two things. One, I went out and I got a job in sales because I knew I could make more money in sales than other types of roles to then make enough money to start to pay down that debt. Once I got to a place where I actually paid off that over $100,000, again, combination of credit cards and student loans. First of all, always pay off the highest interest debt first. So if you have student loans at 4% and credit cards at 18% or 27% or whatever, pay off the credit card debt first. Once I paid all that off, and then I also created a 6 months worth of like savings for myself. So if I did lose my job, that I could, account for all my expenses. I then started doing what you were saying earlier, which is I started to max out my 401k and my IRA every year. So those are two suggestions I have for people that if you have enough money and you are, and you don't have any what I call bad debt, right? Aside from like the one thing I think you could still have is like a mortgage, and even people still have questions about that, but make enough money and then start maxing out your 401k and your IRA every year. And that will put you on that path to having the 1.5 or the 4 million as Bo's going to have, or 6 million, depending on how the market does across the next, 30 or 40 years.
Bobby, talk to us about assets and liabilities as well. I think that most people out there, they think, hey, I have 2 cars, I have a nice house. These are my assets. And in fact, if you typically go to a financial advisor, financial planner, on your balance sheet, those will show up as assets, correct?
Yeah,
Can you tell us about the difference here?
And it's really simple. And again, I'm stealing a lot of this from Robert Kiyosaki. So all credit to him. I mean, it's really simple. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. And most people think of their primary residence as an asset. It is not. Your primary residence is not an asset. Your car is not an asset. Your car is not giving you $100 every month. Typically speaking, your house, unless you're renting out a portion of it to somebody, right, is not giving you money. You're spending money to maintain it, to pay your mortgage, etc. So the point simply is that an asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes money out, and we as individuals, every time a dollar comes into our possession, we have the opportunity to make a decision about, how do we choose to spend that dollar? Do we choose to spend that dollar buying assets or buying liabilities? And so most of us, and again, myself included, for so many years, and still to this day, right? Because there are things we still want and need. We buy liabilities.
You're right. And now, Bobby, you've done this a few times. Bobby walked me through the math of doing this with real estate, actually. And then after a few times, it finally started to click. I don't know why I didn't start doing this years ago. But in the very recent future, our own Bo Brabo, lover of all, financial genius,
No,
veteran, he and his wife actually created an asset in real estate. And I'm going to word it like this. They created an asset that puts money in their pocket that at the end of the day, you really paid nothing for. Is that correct, Bo?
The only correction that I would make is that it's all my wife. She's the brilliant
Smart man right there.
real
Smart
estate,
man.
real estate person. It's her company. I joke and that, I'm the labor, and I hang blinds, I hang curtains, I do the stuff at the end to get it ready. I help clean it up. I'm no craftsman or tradesman by any means. She's the brain, but you are absolutely right. And that is what she did. She has the vision for that. She has the vision for turning, dilapidated houses into nice homes. And that's what she did. And now that house is getting rented out. And like Bobby said, it actually created an asset where it's money coming back in.
It's amazing. So if you wouldn't mind, just on a super basic level for the listener out there that is sitting here saying, because I imagine like if it were me sitting out there, here's what I'd be saying. Well, great. I don't have a pile of cash to invest in real estate. I don't have tons of money out here. How can I create even one asset that puts cash flow into my pocket every month, just at its simplest form? Can you kind of walk through what your awesome wife did here?
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, it takes, you have to have some money, and she used a combination of, and leveraged a combination of working with the local bank and the county, what's called here is called the county land bank. And she was able to get a property that was incredibly inexpensive, but it was not inhabitable, right? So the house needed a ton of work. And she got all of that work done. And we're talking a brand new roof, new appliances, new kitchen, new bathroom, furnace, heating, cooling, ventilation, all that stuff. And got it to a point. Well, now it's a beautiful looking house today. But yeah, I mean, I would agree. It takes some money, and it takes some smarts and knowing how the banks work. So in the event where you can use other people's money, if you will, and that's having, I think what my wife does brilliantly in the community is build relationships. So she has relationships with all the players, and there's a lot of them. So inspectors, contractors, county officials, you name it, the bankers. Yeah, that has helped her significantly.
That's amazing.
I don't know if I'm answering that well enough for the listeners.
So,
Luke, I can give you an example too. Like that's similar to what Bo is describing.
yeah.
So, and by the way, this sounds easier than what it is, because it requires you to do all the things that Bo is describing, and it requires you to have a team. Like, I want to be very clear that having a team of people that that can do all these things is critical to your success. But let's assume that you've got a team, or you got connections in the community that Bo sort of is describing. The way you can literally create an asset for yourself with using very little of your own money eventually, or leveraging other people's money, to Bo's point. Let's say you find a house that you buy for, say, $75,000, right? And that house needs $25,000 worth of work. But the after repair value of that house is $140,000, right? So if you look at every house in that neighborhood, there's one house, it's kind of dilapidated. The comps on the house in that neighborhood, again, they're all, when those houses are doing, when they're looking nice, they're 140 grand. You go buy it for 75, you put 25 into it, you've created forced appreciation. It's now worth 140. So now you've had to float $100,000 up front. So you need that money, right? You can go get a hard money loan, or you could maybe that money, you can pull that out of a HELOC, a home equity line of credit that you might have, but you're floating that money for a few months while you buy it, close on it, renovate it. Then because investors have to leave a higher percentage of money in their in a mortgage, you go to a bank and say, listen, I've got a renter in this place. They're paying me, $1,100 a month. If I were to take out a mortgage on this place at 140 and leave 25% in, your monthly payment is, let's call it $700, depending on the interest rate. Now you've got an asset where you just got a mortgage on that. You left 25% in. You're able to pull your money back out. You have a renter in that house, and that house is now throwing off a couple $100 once you assume, taxes, insurance, mortgage, repairs, property management. If you want to have someone manage it for you, let's say it's throwing off $150 a month of positive cash flow. Boom, there you go. Like that's the formula. Now, that is much harder to do than just me throwing that out there. Like you got to find you got to look at 50 properties before you can find one that meets the criteria you want it to have. You need to have the team in place that Bo's describing. Because if you buy a place and you have nobody to actually come in and fix it, then you could be sitting on a property for 2, 3, 4 months. And it's now at that point in time, it's a liability.
Let me ask you this. Is it harder than, say, setting aside 30% of your annual income as a household so that you can retire?
I mean, my personal take on that is you're never going to save your way to retirement. Although there are people out there in this community. Have you guys heard of the FIRE community, right? The Financial Independence Retire Early community?
No. There's
a community out there that if you go online, Google FIRE community, that are all about basically reducing your expenses, creating passive streams of income, and then retiring in your late 20s, 30s, early 40s. So part of it's just about how much money you don't have to make a ton of money every year, right, to get to that place. And people who are actually saving 50, 60, 70% of their take home pay. But if you're not going to be that sort of extreme about it, I would, again, going back to Bo's point around diversification, I like to max out my 401k and IRA. Beyond that, I'm not really putting a ton of money into the market because one, I'm not Warren Buffett. I put all my money into index funds. Now I can buy certain industries if I want to focus on an industry, but it's still, I still believe in not being an individual stock picker. But then I'd rather have a business that I understand, Luke. So I would take that same 30% and I would personally put it into a business. Real estate is my business now, right? Where I understand the math behind it. That house is is an asset for me. Again, the more houses I can acquire and create and just repeat that formula, the better off I'm going to be long term, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, it's such a difference. I mean, you look at these. So, Bobby, I share the same, I think, mindset as you now, as I want to find different ways to make more money. And not to knock on things like the Dave Ramsey model. And for people that, listeners that don't know about the Dave Ramsey model, here's the short of it is pretty much you have no debt. You pay off all your credit cards. You don't take out loans for anything like cars, anything like that. Your goal is to pay off your house, and then that'll enable you to save more money. No knock on it, but wow, it is just a completely different animal. And it's not my style. I like nicer things. I like to do nicer things. I mean, even a nice bottle of wine or something like that, right? It's just not in my style to say I want to cut back that much on how I live my life. So I'd rather think of how I can go out and make more money, right? And I think it's that mindset that you're talking about, Bobby. Let me throw a question out to both of you that I think, let's I'm going to leave this one out there. What's more risky, investing in real estate or investing in stocks?
Bo, do you want to go first or?
Sure. I think it's investing in stocks. And I'll give you just my short answer. Real estate. Everybody has to have a place to live always, whether you're in a depression or recession, whatever, inflation times, deflation times, and our population is growing, and it's only growing. So year after year after year, there are generations of individuals as they get older and older, where they transition from apartment to house to retirement property to second house to third house, whatever, and that is just a continual. It's a continual cycle, and I think that using the tactics like we've been talking about and creating income streams on assets, and we're not talking, if you have $150 net off of a property, we're not talking about stopping with one property, right? We're talking about continuing that and continuing your mantra. So over time, and if you started this when you were 30 or in your 30s, and by the time you hit 60, you have, who knows, you might have 30 properties. Even if you did one property a year, bam, now you're netting, quite a bit of income every single month, and you still have the assets. So I think it's real estate.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Bo on that, but with a quick sort of a caveat up front. I think the most risky thing, Luke, whether it's stocks or it's Bitcoin or it's gold or it's real estate or whatever it is just not investing in your financial IQ. Like just that is the riskiest thing. So real estate or stocks. And listen, there are plenty of people out there who've made a boatload of money in both, and would probably say, stocks are less risky or real estate's less risky. I happen to agree with Bo that real estate is less risky only because I'm putting money into the stock market through my 401k and my IRA, but like to pretend like I'm buying, and I'm buying index funds, but to pretend like I'm buying those index funds, which are comprised of the companies that are in those various funds. Pretend like I actually know what's happening enough in those companies, or I know what's going on is kind of silly. So unfortunately, if you really think about it, what I'm hoping is that across the next 30 or 40 years, that the stock market, as it has done historically, will grow hopefully 6-7% on average for the next 30 or 40 years. That's, I'm still going down that path. And I think that's one strategy or one thing around diversification that I'm doing. And listen, maybe the stock market will return 30% across the next 30 or 40 years. Maybe it'll be flat like Japan has been largely for the last 20, like who knows? So the reason why I happen to like real estate better is because it's really simple. Like I can understand it. And it's not like I'm not thinking about, do I buy Apple at $282 a share or Microsoft at $1,500 a share, when I don't really truly understand, the intricacies of an industry or, their competitive set or whatever. I can look at a house and say, okay, great. Like the math is pretty simple. Rent at this amount of money every month. Assume X in vacancy. Assume X in repairs. Assume X in other costs. What's my purchase price? Like, what's my cash on cash return? Does that make sense or not? And it's something simpler for me to understand. And I think that actually goes back to something you've heard Warren Buffett say, like, he doesn't invest in businesses he doesn't understand. And so I would argue that like investing in things you understand is really smart. Now, you could also say that what I just said about putting money into my 401k and IRA then just goes against that principle. It does in some ways. But I've also, read a lot of books that talk about the idea that the index funds, if you're going to invest, are the best way to do it. Those are pre-tax dollars. And I'm not investing beyond my 401k and my IRA in the market. Trying to pick individual stocks.
You brought up a huge point there, Bobby, is that in real estate or things that you can understand, you can use your financial IQ and market knowledge to gain more money. But in the stock market, you're betting that it's just going to go up as it historically has, and you have zero control as to what's going on. So you look at like what's just happened during the pandemic and the crash. Even if you try to do something with your financial IQ or get the inside track about what's going on, it's considered insider trading, right? And it's illegal. You go into the real estate industry, and now all of a sudden those same things that are described as insider trading are not only encouraged, they're expected in the real estate industry. So you can use your financial IQ to make better decisions. Bo, I didn't tell you this, and listeners, is kind of funny. I called Bobby one morning. I had won $100 in my company's Super Bowl square thing, where it's just a bunch of squares.
I get it.
I think a bunch of people play it. Anyway, so I go, man, I didn't even realize that I won this. They transferred it to my Venmo account. And I said, Bobby, got a free $100 here. What stock should I buy? Like, I just want to do something risky, right? And Bobby's response was like, he's like, you know what? You might as well just buy something nice for yourself, because you don't get to buy stocks like the people on the brokerage floor do at the New York Stock Exchange. Like, you will never get in on some kind of stock that's just going to make you a bunch of money on it, especially for like $100.
Yeah.
Like, go and buy something else with it, man. And then that's kind of like a big gut punch to me, because I was like, wow, he's 100% right that me as a consumer, which, by the way, what the stock market really relies on is not necessarily the huge companies. What keeps it going are the individual investors. Yet we have the least leverage of anybody to make money,
I will say that, and I obviously have a significant portion of my my assets in the stock market in the form of those retirement vehicles. There are some books that for people who are interested in the stock market that I would absolutely recommend people read, and I think there are 4 books that I think have really helped me. One of them is not about the stock market, but it's just a great book. It's super dry. It was written like 20 years ago, but it's called The Millionaire Next Door. And the authors basically just like study. I think they studied like 1,000 millionaires and try to understand like more about them. What are their habits? What do they do? Who are they? What kind of businesses are they in? How much money do they pay for a haircut? All kinds of just kind of crazy questions. So it's just really interesting interesting read. There's another book called The Simple Path to Wealth, which I think is, again, pretty easy to understand. It's a big proponent of just taking your money and putting it in the stock market and putting it in index funds. But I think it's a solid book. And then I think the most important thing, if you are going to invest in the stock market, is understanding the following 2 words: asset allocation. It's about asset allocation. And there are 2 books that I've read that I think are just really on point with this. One is called It's All About Asset Allocation. The second one is called The Intelligent Asset Allocator. And the idea is that you want to buy or you want to have non-correlated assets, which is why people try to have a combination of like stocks or bonds or commodities or what have you. But again, trying to pick individual stocks, again, if I can recommend against one thing, is picking against individual stocks. And there's always somebody out there who's like, yeah, but my grandfather or my mom gave me like, 20 shares of GE 30 years ago, and it's gone up by X, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But like, if you look at the S&P 500 and you look at I can't remember the exact stat, but it's like the S&P 500 in the 60s was obviously composed of 500 companies. I think like 25% of the companies in the 60s in the S&P 500 now exist in the S&P 500. So the point is, like, even companies that seem like they're going to be around forever, Amazon, Apple, whoever, Microsoft, in 10 or 15 years could be gone or diminished significantly from where they are right now. So don't pick individual stocks, buy index funds, but you can also get specific with index funds. You can pick an index fund in the healthcare industry, or you can pick an index fund that focuses on dividends if that's your thing. So there are a lot of ways to decrease your risk and spread it out across, multiple sort of asset avenues.
Yeah, Luke. So everything that Bobby just said. Now let's take that back to what we talked about in the beginning, where we know that education is failing people, right? From basic finance, how to reconcile your checkbook or your bank account, right? How to understand credits and debits and just personal finance and the difference between tracking your paycheck and your expenses and how much goes out and creating a personal household budget. And then try to teach them from a banking perspective what compound interest is and how compound interest works, right? Well, we didn't teach them home finance, but now we're going to try and teach them compound interest, maybe, if you get that in any type of economics class, maybe. And now add on to that the complexity of everything Bobby just said about index funds and allocating assets across different investments, right? And add in the fact that everything that you read and see, number one, if you take the basic premise that we were not educated well in finance to begin with, and you go to the bank, maybe you know how to go to a bank and you know a savings account and they show you an interest rate and you understand that. And now you're going to jump to the stock market or to even mutual funds, your 401k. And then you get this number and it says, here's the average annualized return or your 5-year return or your 10-year return. And it's presented to you as a percentage. Well, most people, and when you really talk to people, they do not understand that that is not an interest rate. That what you're seeing is an average annual return, and you don't make money or lose money until you take your money out. And then it's whatever it was at the day you sold it for when you took it out. Kind of like real estate. You buy a house, if you sell it 10 years from now, if you sell it in a down market, well, you may have lost a ton of money. But if you sell it in the up market, you may have made a lot of money on that piece of real estate, right? It's not an easy thing. It's complicated. And I think it's risky for people who don't understand it. They're not reading. And if they haven't gone through the whole litany of financial IQ and financial education, it can be very risky for people in general.
Yeah, for somebody out there who's just sort of like, if you're just starting out, if you're like, all right, like I'm just really at the very beginning of this process, I would say, I'd say really probably like 2 or 3 things. One, just start reading. There's so many resources out there. The books I've mentioned just a little while ago, there are a bunch of websites out there, podcasts. Like there's this one website I stumbled across called Mr. Money Mustache. Great website. Talks all about like how do you save money? How do you think about money? This guy's a really interesting take on wealth and everything else. There's another podcast I listen to called Consuelo Max Wealth Track, where she interviews some of the brightest minds every week in finance. I started forcing myself to read the Wall Street Journal like 15 years ago. I didn't understand half the terms in it, but the Wall Street Journal is just I think like a great paper. In your Apple News feed, there's just tons of free things you can follow and read. So one is just like just start reading and like familiarizing yourself with just increase your financial IQ. 2, like if you have bad debt, do your best to reduce your expenses, stop buying liabilities, pay off that bad debt, and get yourself back to neutral. And then 3, I would say, is just give yourself a 3-month or if you can, a 6-month cushion. Obviously, we're in the midst of the pandemic right now. But if you still have a job, right now is a great time to think about, all right, how can I reduce my monthly expenses and how can I increase my savings rate? Because you might lose your job in 3 months or 6 months. So you don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We could be entering a depressionary era. So those are the 3 things I would recommend sort of just right out of the gate to sort of bounce off what Bo just said around like trying to understand some of these more complicated things. Like if you're at that place, like do those 3 things.
That's great advice.
Can I throw one more sort of, sorry, Luke, go ahead.
No, please keep going.
Just one more, just a couple more thoughts on real estate, because it's something that I'm certainly passionate about and I think can be a tremendous wealth builder. One, like going back to your question earlier about like risk, Luke, and like there's tons of risk in real estate, tons of risk. And I think even though Bo and I are clearly both pro real estate in comparison to say, stocks overall, I think that's because it's a path we've chosen. It's a path that we're constantly reading about, learning about, participating in, learning from. But there are lots of real estate deals that are risky or have proven to be bad investments because people didn't understand enough about that actual investment, what was going on there. One technique that I think you can use if you want to get into real estate and figure out, like, is this a path I want to go down? Is something called house hacking. I learned about this from the Bigger Pockets, biggerpockets.com. It's again, tons of great resources on their website. They have a great podcast. But essentially, you move into a house and maybe you buy a duplex, or you buy a house with an extra room, or you buy a house with a basement that has a separate entrance. And you buy that house, let's say your mortgage is going to be $1,500 a month. And let's say you can rent it for the room or the basement or whatever for $750. Now you've reduced your monthly mortgage payment in half. Or let's say you buy it on the cheap, as Bo's wife does. You rehab it. Let's say your monthly mortgage is only $750, and you rent part of it for $750. now you're literally living for free. So that's one way to think about sort of like getting into real estate, learning what it's like to be a landlord a little bit. And it's the path that my wife and I have taken across the last 7 or 8 years. We've sort of similar to that. We bought places with the intention of renting them out. So we bought them. We got an owner-occupied mortgage, which means we didn't have to, one, we got a better rate because you get better rates as an owner-occupied mortgage than you do as an investor. Two, we didn't have to put as much money down. So we weren't as highly leveraged into the properties. We only had to put like 10% down. But we knew that our mortgage payment would work when we went to rent it out, knowing what the rental comps would be. And we lived there for a year or two, saved up as much money as we could for another down payment on another place, moved out, rented it out, and they're cash flowing at like $100 a month. But then also we're paying down the principal on those places, and we're getting the appreciation from them. So if we keep them for 30 years, not only will we have made the cash flow on them, but we will also now have an asset that goes from paying us $100 a month probably to like $700 or $800 a month because we no longer have the monthly principal to pay.
That's incredible. And it goes back to what I think you said at the beginning of like the definition of wealth, right? Most people think that wealth is a number that you need to have. So we started off saying, all right, if you want $60,000 a year when you retire, you need 1.5 million, right? All about mindset. And that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. So if you think about it right now, how much wealth is worth, if you have $20,000 and it costs you $10,000 a month to live, which I think for a lot of, households out there is about right. You divide that by time, you have 2 months worth of wealth. And that is all you have. Then it's done. Then you have no money left and you're screwed at that point. But you flip your mindset and say, well, if I can have cash flow that equals $11,000 a month and my expenses are only $10,000 a month, then it's not necessarily a number. Then that $11,000 a month is infinite wealth at that point, because now you can live, still put money in your pocket, and you don't need to have millions and millions of dollars in the bank. In fact, I would argue that you are actually in a better position of financial strength with that equation than you are with even $2-3 million in the bank, because you figured out a way to replenish that cash flow.
Yep. I think that's great.
Bobby, you're a genius.
No, I'm not, but thanks.
You're a total genius.
All of this stuff is like just a combination of frankly, like just like crappy life experiences, making a bunch of, bad decisions myself. But also all this information is like, it's all out there. It's all available. Like there's nothing I'm saying that somebody else smarter and, frankly, more experienced hasn't said. I'm just, the only things I'm throwing out there to you all and to the Bo and Luke Nation right now is just things that are literally free, almost free, and are it's just a function of, at the end of the day, it really comes back to like your mindset, your financial IQ, and just thinking about, all right, do I want to do something about this, and making this a priority, and realizing that that money is not, it shouldn't be a taboo subject. It should be something that so your relationship with money is like ever evolving. Your priorities change and your needs change, but understanding how money works can really, I think, actually it can bring a ton of happiness to your life, because you have more control at that point. And I think people oftentimes feel out of control when it comes to money. And so I think my message is take control of it if you can.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I think one thing that's super important around whatever somebody decides to do, and I think it's another reason why I'm an advocate of the real estate side of things. When you, from a mental health perspective, when you work on or you buy a house, you see the house, it's a product, it's a thing that you can touch and see, you can work on it, you can make it better, you can improve it. You see it's like an achievement, right? And you see it, it's visual. And then it starts producing cash flow for you. And I think that does huge things for your overall health and your well-being. Aside from, getting a summary report on your account from a financial institution for your investments, with just numbers on a page. When you rehab a house or whatever the case might be, I mean, there's some real joy that comes when you see the final product. I know the current house my wife just finished. When we first looked at that house, my response was, "Do you have a bulldozer? Because it just needs to be plowed over." I mean, that's how bad it was. It hadn't been lived in 6 years. I mean, it was in really, really rough condition. And now I look at it today and I'm like, hey, let's move in. It was that much of a transformation. And then around her company, she's got such a great vision. And not only is it doing things for us as a family and creating a cash flow, her motto is to rejuvenate the neighborhood one house at a time. But think about what she's doing. So she flips the house, she renovates the house. It is now a home for someone who needed a home, has a home that they can move into. And it's a really nice home. And now it hadn't been lived in 6 years, so it was producing no tax revenue for the county. So now it's producing tax revenue for the county. So there's cash flow to the county, there's cash flow to us, and somebody has a nice home to live in. And the neighbors, I think every neighbor, 3 or 4 houses left, right, have
so
come
happy.
over.
So happy.
They're happy. They're so happy, right? I mean, look at everything that just happened. That's one house. So the joy that you get from that, it's overwhelming, and I think goes way beyond your own personal cash flow that you're getting from such a property. That's like the icing on the cake, really, for you personally.
That's right. Hey, and Bobby, you got to run, don't you?
I do.
Okay.
All right, Bobby, we could talk with you for hours. So thank you for being on the podcast again. We're gonna have you back.
Thanks for having me, guys. I feel like I want to. I probably need to go like Michael Jordan style. I've done 3 in a row, or no, not 3 in a row, but three in a short period of time. So my 3-peat. Take a couple of years off, right? Go play baseball. Try another podcast somewhere, and then I'll come back and try to 3-peat again.
And crush it again.
Yeah, I think we have other plans for you, so we're not going to allow you to do that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're going to create another passive income stream, and I think you're part of that. So we can't let you go.
Awesome.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right. Well, Bobby, you take care, good sir.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be.
Great seeing.
Thanks, Bobby.
Absolutely, man.
Take care.
Take care. Bo, before we go, I'm going to make a couple more points if that's okay. A couple things I guess were like almost epiphanies for me to realize is, number one, banks make money off of, let me back up. People need to figure out through their financial IQ how to utilize OPM, right? Other people's money.
Yeah.
And how to leverage debt in order to create these assets. So one thing that I'd highly recommend to people is to start relationships with smaller banks out there.
Mm-hmm.
So your community banks, like, look, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase, great. Look, there's a lot of hoops to jump through there, and they have a lot of customers. Mm-hmm. Banks make money off of lending you money. And I don't think people realize that. When you create a savings account, that's a liability for the bank. The bank loses money off of your savings because they have to pay you to have your money in there. The only way that they make money is to lend out money. So if one bank tells you no, don't just say, okay, well, now I can't have an asset, I can't create anything. Go to other banks. There's smaller banks where, they could just go ask the president of the bank, hey, do you want to lend Bo, $500,000? And I would, right? So
yeah, it's one of the best ways. That's a great point, Luke. And it's one of the best ways, it's one of the best ways to start your business. Because local banks, they all have individuals that specialize in small business, and they have a job because they want to help you, right? Yes. They want to help small business succeed. And same with a small business. They're not making money on the cash deposits or whatever that come in for the business. They're making money on loaning that business money, right? That's how, like you said, that's why a bank is in business, to loan money, and they make interest off of that and so forth. And they're using all of the, large portions of the deposits to loan the money, right?
Right.
So when you develop or you start that relationship with that local bank rep, trust me, they are a plethora of information. They will help you. They will set you on a course. So even if the great thing is, even if you can't get money, let's say the day you go in there, right? You don't qualify or you're not meeting certain specifications. They will help you, and they will give you the roadmap to getting money from them. And the great thing about that is you walk back in 6 months later to your same bank rep who now you've communicate with, you're getting to know each other, and you say, okay, Jim or Sue, right? I did everything you said for me to do. And they're like, great, I'm printing the paperwork. We're going to sign it. Funds will be in your account within 2 business days, right? So they are the ones that can really set you on a path to success.
That's right. Work with them. Just work with them. They're not scary. And if you don't get the answer you want from one, just go to another one.
Yeah, exactly. There are multiple community banks in cities and towns across America, right?
Yep.
And pick the one who you feel is gives you good service and is working on your behalf to create a win-win situation for you and for them. Not the ones who seem to be defensive, and only have their bank's interest at heart.
That's right. That's right. And I love that. I also heard this saying that really put things into perspective for me, that all liabilities are also assets. So like your house, is your liability, but it's an asset on somebody else's balance sheet. And did you know, it's crazy, right? And so did you know that the banks expect, so they go by data. So them lending you money for a house is not risky to them because they're going to make all their money. They amortize the interest that they're charging you. So for listeners, if you're not very familiar, what that means is your first payment has a lot of interest on it. It goes down every single month so that there's no interest on probably your final payment of the house after 30 years. But it's front loaded for the first 7 years because according to statistics, the bank actually forecasts that you're going to move every 7 years. So if you move every 7 years, just like the bank thinks that you're going to do, and you take out a new 30-year mortgage every single time, think about it. You're basically just paying interest to banks your entire life as you move from house to house to house after, over the course of your lifetime span here. And you're really not paying much towards the principal at all. I mean, you are a little bit, but not really.
But not really, right? And that's how they keep making, and that's how they make money. So that example alone demonstrates the whole reason that the banks are in business, right? It's the interest, and it's to loan the money so they can make the interest. It's like you said, it's assets to them. So that's their cash flow. That's generating the cash flow. And then because you have that cycle of sale, on average every 7 years, all the principal comes back to them to pay off the main body of the loan anyways. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you look like, so I listen to the Bigger Pockets podcast too, and I've been going down severe rabbit holes with like a real estate investment calculator. So everyone, listeners, if you go to like calculator.net, there's a rental property investment calculator, and it is mind blowing. You can put in all the factors that you want, your down payment, what you're going to get for rent in the place. There's even a spot for, like how much insurance is and taxes. So you can put everything in. And it's mind blowing once you multiply these out over multiple properties. So by doing what Bobby said, where you actually refinance and take your initial investment out, if you do a little bit of dreaming, so like I'm in my 30s, so I'm like, well, what if I could do it to like 100 properties, right? Mm-hmm. And pay them off in 15 years because since I'm renting them, somebody else is paying off the mortgage. I'm not even paying those off so that I'm paying less interest. If you do that to like 100 houses that, by the way, are not like huge, lavish, I'm not talking about Beverly Hills mansions here. I'm talking about, starter homes out there for families that would be attractive for them to rent. Mm-hmm. You do that 100 times. When you retire, retirement isn't even an age at that point. It's just how quickly can I get to that many properties? And I'm telling you, when you put in the numbers, you're making between $1 and $2 million a year in cash flow. And that's not like I need this by the time I'm 65 to retire. Whenever you hit that number, you now have infinite income. So think about that. You retire when you're 40, you live to be 90, that's what, 50 years?
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of saving up $50 million by the time you're 40.
Yeah. It's just fascinating. Yeah. It's almost makes you speechless because it's all in the realm of possibility. Right. And you have, why I like it is you have so much, you don't have full control by any means, but you have more control than than sticking your money in the stock market. Yeah. And then what is, and it helps you redefine what is retirement, right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost just becomes, instead of you saying, oh, I'm going to hit this age of 62, 65, whatever, retire, start my annuity payments out of my 401k plan or whatever, and draw my social security, and then what? So you still have a life, you still have to live. Right. So I personally, so I'm not 30 something, I'm 50 something. So, I, still going strong, still dreaming, still getting educated, still going after goals. It's just life. Right. And when you can create the passive income streams, and you're not dependent, at some point you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't need to be dependent on not withdrawing Social Security until I'm 67, so I get the full payment, and that's what you're banking on. And that, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But creating the passive income streams just kind of I think it just lets you live your life versus going after some magic age that you really don't know what's going to happen 12, 15, 20, 30 years from now. And like I said before, it's a lot of fun.
Definitely a lot of fun. And then it's not like, I think about, oh my gosh, just working until I'm 65 and hopefully getting to that number, which by the stats that I pulled up earlier, like that, you got to save up a lot of money to have not a lot of money every single year once you retire, right? Like I want to be killing it when I retire. I want to be like, I don't know, going to an island with you or something like that and spending money and having a good time, eating fine foods and drinking fine wine.
Yeah.
I don't want to be pinching pennies at the end of my life.
Yeah, I'm with you. So the more streams of money that you can create, the better off you will be. And then that takes, literally, when you spread out your income streams, it literally spreads out the risk, right?
Yeah.
So I would even say you could even think about that in the real estate portfolio and having multiple rental properties. If you have one rental property, all the risk is in that one property. So if it goes vacant, or you have a renter that doesn't pay on time, whatever the case might be, the only money that you're bringing in is from that house. But once you reach that goal of 10 properties, 20 properties, 30 properties, you're at 30 properties, and even if 10% are vacant, well, that's only 3 houses. You still have 27 properties producing net positive cash flow every month.
That's right.
So you've reduced the risk of the fear of, a bad tenant or a house being vacant, it can't be rented. You're taking that risk away through the volume of properties that you have.
Yep. That's right. And look at, even go beyond real estate. I just pulled something up online here because I wanted to just illustrate that you can use assets any way you want. So you know what a bobcat is, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a piece of machinery.
Yeah.
It's like,
I love it.
Yeah, it's like a land moving. Yeah, bobcats are great, right?
Yep.
So a new cost of a bobcat is anywhere from $20,000 to $65,000. Used ones, you can pick one up from $5,000 to $30,000. Guess what? To rent them out, the rentals range from $500 to $1,300 per week.
Yeah. Wow.
So if you pick one up for, let's say a used one for $10,000, you rent it out for $500 a week. Even if you only have it rented out half the time, that's what, like you just almost doubled your money in 1 year based on a used bobcat. And again, folks, finance the thing, use other people's money. Now you're actually getting cash flow. You take a $20,000 loan out on this thing for what, 5 years? You're probably only paying, I don't know, $250, $300 a month. And now you rent it out once and somebody paid that payment for you and you're cash flowing more. on something as simple as that. Now, I like real estate more because it's going to appreciate in value. I don't think the Bobcat is going to appreciate in value that much. It'll probably just, be
Yeah.
something that you
Another-
junk,
Yep.
but
Another fantastic one that I love, and I've thought about it many times. I haven't seen it here where I live, but I know it's in different places. If you are whatever, if you're working on your own house, or you're even if you're doing a landscaping project for your house, all the debris has to go somewhere. So
Yep.
if you call somebody and you rent a dumpster, that can be a few $100, and it could leave marks in your driveway. They're heavy because it gets dropped
Yes.
off. Well, there's also trailers where people buy, same thing. You buy a trailer and it's outfitted with sides and rails and so forth, and then somebody rents that from you, and it's on normal tires, so it's not making big huge imprints in your driveway, and they just drop the trailer off at your house, and you fill it with your debris, right? And they come back. They come back the next day or 2 days, however long you reserved it for, at probably half the cost of getting a dumpster, maybe even less, and then they take it and dump it.
They're probably super cheap too to purchase.
So yeah, hell of a lot cheap. You can get a good trailer like that, I think, for a few grand, new, $3,000 to $5,000 new. And I literally listened to a guy, and I think he was up to like 10. He had like 20 trailers, right? And he was just busy all the time. So it turns into his job and you got this revenue stream of, I just rent trailers and I just drop them off in people's driveway and pick them up.
Unbelievable.
It's
unbelievable.
Isn't that unbelievable?
So simple.
Yeah. Right. And then you get to the point where he can afford to hire somebody to go drop them off and pick them up. So,
yes.
Right. So it becomes passive. It becomes another passive income stream for himself. Think about the young guy or girl who starts mowing lawns. That lawnmower is an asset and it's producing money every time they go mow somebody's lawn. So you invest in a push mower, a riding mower, a few $100, yeah. A riding mower, a weed whipper. And the next thing you know, you've got a business, and those are all assets as long as you're using them to charge other people to do their lawn.
That's right. That's right. And then now you can hire somebody to go out there and use those same assets.
Yeah. That all comes back to your financial IQ, your business IQ, being innovative and have ideas and thinking through things, and then not being afraid to go out there and get after it.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And yeah, think of ways. I think the trick is, especially with the financial IQ, is to think of ways where you can use those assets to make you money where it's not you doing the work, right? So you go back to the lawn business, you can buy those assets super cheap. I mean, heck, you can finance those at Home Depot. Mm-hmm. You could cash flow positive month one. So everything you mentioned there, let's say you're even getting like a really nice riding lawnmower and then a nice push mower, weed whacker, etc. You're out of Home Depot for less than $5,000, right?
Yeah.
So now you look at that, even if you put it at like 12-month financing, mm-hmm. right? That's what, a little under, what am I thinking about? $400 a month each?
Yep.
So now you get somebody to do that. If you're making $1,000 a month, you're cash flowing positive on this thing, and you didn't even put up any of your own cash to get the assets.
That's the thing, right? Yeah. And you could end up, wow, you're giving me a new idea.
Bo's lawn care business coming in 2021.
Yeah. And all I need to do is find an independent contractor. It doesn't even have to be an employee, and
That's
say,
right.
hey, and then even if you add the trailer, so just come with your truck and I'll work on getting the clients, right? I don't have to go mow the lawns. You go mow the lawns. You get X dollars out of each lawn you mow, right?
Yep.
And bam, we're in business.
That's right. Bo knows lawns. That's what I would call it.
That's just, yeah, it's just thinking through the endless possibilities and how you could create some revenue streams for yourself.
This is fun. Well, this is a good segue because I actually need the work. This is a Sunday, folks, and I need to get out and do yard work right now. I'm going to go to the lake later, celebrate my father-in-law's birthday, so I better get after it. But, Bo, this has been fantastic. Listeners, I hope you got as much out of this as we had. This has been beneficial for me. I mean, I could talk about this with you for hours, Bo.
Yeah, it's a great topic, and then it's fun to go out and actually do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
All right. Well, since Bobby already left, Bo, do you want to like just shout out that's a wrap?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Bo and Luke Show. Don't forget to go to theboandlukeshow.com where you can find, it's the easiest place to find links to all the podcast platforms that our show is on. We have the YouTube channel embedded right there where you can listen and subscribe right from the website. So it's theboandlukeshow.com. Check it out. Send us feedback. Use the feedback form. We love to hear from our listeners, each and every one of you. Make comments on the YouTube page. If you like what you hear, click the thumbs up. If you don't like it, click the thumbs down. Because Luke and I, just like what we want to do for you, we are always striving to do better ourselves. And we hope that you get that type of inspiration from us. So without further ado, Luke, brother, that's a wrap.